let's get into hats. It's definitely a part of the story. I have a hat right here. I forgot to wear it at the beginning. Can you see this hat?
Yes.
So this is a Victorian hat I found on the internet. This is made by a woman in Texas who is from London. And this woman in Texas and her two daughters are making hats like this now. And you can find them on the internet. I wanted to find a hat that was somewhat exemplary of what my grandmother would have been making. Now here's a little more information. So can you see the white here? This is white felt. Okay. So I'm not sure, I need to find out when felt came into existence. But what felt is boiled, beaten wool.
Oh.
So the wool is put into pots and boiled, which softens it, and then they beat it under pressure and heat, and it molds together and becomes what is called felt. So when the Victorian hat making craze came into existence, everybody began making these kinds of hats and wearing these hats. Now this hat has a blue layer and then a felt layer here, and flowers and feathers here in the front, and a little bow back here, and all of this veil netting coming down the back. This is called a French riding hat, and it's a little small for my head, which is why I'm not wearing it. It won't even stay on my head, it's too small. But when I researched all of this very carefully, so Blanche Bonnet also had a wooden trunk, and the trunk is pictured in the book. You might want to show it to everybody. And that was the other heirloom in her estate. The trunk is really just as valuable as this little book here in terms of being a touchstone in the book. So once I learned about the hat making, I figured out how Bonnie used the trunk. Now, 15 years ago, that was a pile of sticks in a bag because it was so badly damaged. My mother found a woman in Jacksonville, Illinois, which was my mother's hometown, who now knew how to restore old trunks. So what you're looking at on page 251 is the restored version of the trunk. So here is how she used the trunk. The trunk is maybe 2.5 feet long and about 2 feet high. So she would have folded yard goods in the bottom of the trunk. And then on top of that, she would have stacks of these hats. So this would be the pattern hat. They were called pattern hats. They had been pressed into shape in a mold with very hot heat. And hat making companies made these molded felt starter hats, maybe you'd call it. So she would have various shapes and sizes of starter hats stacked probably in 2 stacks in the little trunk. Then the top of the trunk had a shelf in it that was about 2 inches deep. And in that shelf, she would have scores and scores of ribbons and hat pins and feathers and flowers and netting. She would have and hat pins. She would have all those supplies in the top of the trunk. She carried this on the back of her trunk. So when she went out to these ranch women, she had all her supplies in the trunk, and she made a hat at the ranch for the woman.
That was amazing. Yeah. So I can understand that, how she would have to go out to these different ranches and make hats for people. Now, did she continue on this career when she moved back to Illinois? Later on?
Very, very interesting question. So when I was a child, she was still making hats. Okay. I was born in 1945, so probably until 1950 or 55, she was still making hats. And she had a dry goods store in the town of Virginia, Illinois, and she had hat racks in the back where her homemade hats were, and she was still selling these. Great. But her husband got her a scholarship to go to a program in St. Louis, and the program was to learn to fit brassieres and girdles.
Oh my goodness.
And so she went to this program, and when she came back, then the back of her store had a special fitting room for this service, and she had boxes and boxes in the back of brassieres and girdles. And so she sieved from hats, which were no longer popular, into ladies' undergarments, which were of course popular and was even a more intimate contribution to her community. And there were many things said in that fitting room that were never told to anyone else.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I think you might have a second book there, Nancy. Actually,
Yeah.
Good too.
But
Wow.
But she became known all over Illinois for this service. And she provided this service to women, you know, big and small.
Oh,
So
my goodness.
for the rest of her career, she was doing this service to her community, but she was moving forward in terms of helping women.
Excellent. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Nancy. I know these girls can't wait to get into this book.